I normally work as a medievalist. In fact, I normally work on disability in the Middle Ages. So though I've given 2 talks, I think, at Oxford before, this is the first time where I've been able to combine my hobby of Tolkien studies with my serious, proper work. Normally I have to moonlight, so this is great. What we've got here, just as an image, is hands matter a lot in Tolkien stories. You'll hear a few examples in a while. And this is a prosthetic hand, 16th century, made in Germany, just as, one emblem in there. Right, I would like to try and do this in 20 minutes in kind of 3 themes: the war and disability, to carry on from the first figure and the theme of the seminar today, and then a little bit on theory, not too much, don't worry, I know it's Sunday morning, and then to look at those, what I call 3 case studies. You'll notice there's 6 case studies, but I've bundled them in groups, coming up with 3. I'll explain later as I go through, why I've come up with that sort of scheme. Right, okay. We've heard about the First World War, during the war, but what happens after? And this is the first war in European history where you have large numbers, and I mean really significantly large numbers, of combatants, of veterans, who've survived. But how have they survived? The cheery expression on the faces of these 2 chaps there, don't forget, this is a propaganda photo. This is, we can, as this title here makes out, we can mend the maimed. Yeah, technology has come so far that after hundreds of thousands of men have returned crippled, blind, deafened, psychologically scarred, we can nevertheless mend them. Because if we couldn't do that, then the horrors of war would be far too great and nobody would ever join up again. So there is certainly that kind of narrative going through. In terms of disability studies, if I take the kind of modern approach to disability, it's also very significant because the early 1920s saw an interest not just in mending the maimed, but also just in learning about the history of disability. The first histories of disability, going back to the ancient world, were written at about that time. Before that, it was just seen as, well, disabled people have always been with us, no need to really get particularly interested in it. And I've just left you a few other kind of bibliographic notes on there, what you might want to look at. Okay, so I've mentioned, a little bit of theory. I come from something called the social model of disability. What that's saying is disability is not a medical condition. The medical model is what was dominant 1920s all the way through up to about the late 1980s. And it said that someone who's disabled is ill, they are sick. And if someone is sick, then medicine can treat them. The social model says you have 2 things. You have impairment and you have disability. And impairment may be what correlates with the medical model. This is the physical or mental or intellectual difference, the underlying anatomical difference, but that alone does not make you disabled yet. It is society's reaction to you. It is the difference between having stairs or having lifts, if you need a wheelchair, getting access to a building. So that is the social aspect of disability laid on top of that. That's going to be important as a distinction because I'd like to apply this to some of the characters in Tolkien's works later on. I've also come up with another idea which I've taken from anthropology, and that is disability as a liminal state. Disability sits between health and illness, regardless of whether you subscribe to the social model or not. You normally, in medicine, you have a restitution narrative. It goes something like, yesterday I was well, today I am ill, tomorrow I will be better. So it's a progression. It is a dynamic condition. Disability, I've put, is static, it's not dynamic. Once someone becomes disabled, or if they are born impaired, they stay like that throughout their lives. This is disregarding all the latest technology and the miracles of modern medicine and all that, because we're looking at the kind of time when Tolkien was writing. So I would again like to draw attention to this liminality of disability, the sitting between two conceptual kind of borders. Okay. So try to apply this to Tolkien's characters. Now, there's probably other ways of doing this, but what I've sort of thought about is I've grouped them into what I call the realistic characters, characters whose impairment is described quite realistically, the heroic characters, and then finally those whose disability or impairment becomes a kind of metaphysical, it becomes symbolic. And I'll go through those pretty much together. So, the realistic characters. These are, funnily enough, they're both from the same story. They frame the tale of the children of Turin. One of them, Sador, is encountered by the young Turin as a child, and the second one, Brandir, kind of comes in at the end and is killed by Turin shortly before Turin's own death. So it's kind of interesting how two disabled characters frame this otherwise catastrophic tale of, you know, the hero who, in many ways, just constantly mucks up. Sador, both of them are, of course, they're not the exact antithesis of heroic because they are disabled through completely mundane things. Sador is disabled through mishandling of his axe. Yeah, it's an accident, literally an accident. It's not anything in war or heroic. And Brandir was no man of war, being lamed by a leg broken in a misadventure. So same kind of story, same kind of background as Sador. And I think, again, this is seeing those two, Sador and Brandir, as a counterpoint to the heroic warriors. The warriors who, dare I say it, actually cause catastrophic events. Yeah? These stay-at-home, unheroic, ignoble characters in many ways are the normal characters. They're how most of us would like to live in peace, which is one of the things that Brandir sort of comes up with as well. The danger of having to do your slides a week before you can actually give the paper is I can't put up one other item here, so I have to try and spell it out. In Old English, there is a word to sum up people like Sador and Brandir who are prevented from doing things for reasons of physical incapacity, for want of a better word, and that word is unmagen. I can't put this up here right now. U-N-M-A-G-A-N, unmagen. And unmagen means not, magan means to be capable of, to be able to do. So these are unmagen characters. They are not capable of doing. Brandir limps and is too slow, he's too late to prevent the death of he's cursed his fate and his weakness. He is unmagen. Sador has to stay back at home, you know, even though he loves Turin and would like to do everything for him. So I think that's worth bearing in mind as part of this realistic description. So the heroic figures, very different. Methos, thank you by the way to Anna Minon, because you mentioned Methos to me when we spoke at the AGM. Methos and Beren, they are both characters who use a hand. That's why I said the hand is important, the prosthetic is important. But how they lose the hand is quite different, and the kind of, you know, what they do with the hand before they lose it. So Methos, we saw it there, is tortured, thank God, and he's hung up by his hand. The only way he can be free is his hand has to be chopped off so that he can be released by fingerprints and fingerprint. He then, however, he does not become disabled because he learns to fight better with his left hand, and he actually becomes the mightiest warrior and leader of the elves fighting against Morgoth. So here there is a kind of restitution narrative, and there is a parallel from Celtic story. There is a character called Nuada of the Silver Hand of Celtic legend, who also loses his position as a leader when he loses his hand, then gets a silver prosthetic hand and is all restored again. So I'd say Methos is in that position. His loss of the hand is more a kind of character defect, because when he tries to touch one of the Silmarils remaining, this is kind of fast forward to the end of the first stage. Mathras and Madlar are the only ones remaining of the two sons of Fëanor. Mathras succeeds in grasping one of the Silmarils, but it sears his hand, his remaining hand, presumably, and languishingly dives into the abyss. So it's kind of what you do with your hands. In some ways, the untarnished hand tarnishes the Silmaril. Now with Beren, you've got the kind of opposite. He can touch the jewel. The jewel suffered his touch and hurt him not. Beren's hand, of course, is lost when, first is handed to the wolf, Carteroth. He becomes named Canian, one-handed. The suffering of this is marked in his face as a subject I want to get back to with the last two characters. He can play a nice little sort of play on words when he goes to Thingol. He says, even now a Silmaril is in my hand, and of course he holds up his existing hand, which is empty, and then the stump of his right hand, because the hand is in the wolf. Now with Beren, the kind of antithesis, or sorry, the opposite to Mathras comes apparently right at the end. When Carteroth is slain, in the otherwise decaying belly of the wolf, the half-consumed belly of the wolf, they find the hand of Beren that held the jewel, which was yet incorrupt. When Magdalene reached forth to touch it, the hand was no more, the Silmaril lay there unveiled. Now this idea of corruption and incorruption is something that you get in medieval hagiography. When the bodies of saints are found, the word for that is invented. That is where our word invention actually comes from. It is a finding of something you set out to look for. So when the bodies of saints are invented, they are found to be incorrupt. The mark of a saintly body is that the flesh hasn't rotted, the corpse does not smell, but has a wonderful, sort of flowery, beautiful perfume, the sign of heaven. That is what happens to Beren's hand around the jewel. So it's a kind of paradisic power of the Silmaril, I would say. So both Mathras and Beren exhibit heroic disability, in that both are larger-than-life characters who in their specific ways overcome their impairments. If you're applying the social model of disability, I'd argue that Beren and Mathras are temporarily impaired when they lose their hand, but they never actually become disabled in that sense. Okay, the last two, Parish and Frodo. What have Parish and Frodo got in common? I'd say that in both of them, their impairment, disability, is a symbolic disability. They are metaphoric disabled figures. I just mentioned that Beren has this kind of similarity with the incorrupt saints. You can take that further. Saints, sometimes the early saints are also martyrs. This idea of martyrdom comes in here quite strongly, I think. Now, Parish, at the beginning, in Leaf by Niggle, had a lame leg, a genuine lame leg, which gave him a good deal of pain. Note the emphasis on a genuine lame leg. There are people who fake disabilities to gain some sort of advantage in charity, etc. But Parish is only demanding needy at the beginning of the story. So later on, in the afterlife, paradise, whatever, he limps a little bit, but then gradually, spending time with Niggle, working together, that limp disappears. So over there, Parish finally loses his limp. And this echoes a concept according to which the medieval afterlife in heaven knew only of intact bodies. In medieval, sorry, again, this is a bit heavy going for early on a Sunday morning. There's medieval theology. People like St. Anselm, early 11th century, came up, so late 11th century, formulated some of these ideas. They're taken up by the big theologians in the 13th century. And it's the idea in heaven there is no corruption. That means no physical corruption. Anyone who goes to heaven is resurrected in perfect body, generally at about the age of 30, because that's the age of Christ when he started his ministry. So therefore, no disability in heaven, with one exception, and those are the martyrs. The martyrs retain the scars of their martyrdom in the Christian Catholic notion of heaven. There's no place for disability amongst sanctity. There is no room for that unless you are a martyr. And that is where I think Frodo comes in. now, because Frodo is like the medieval saints and martyrs, because his disability remains with him even when he goes to Valinor, the Otherworld, the paradise place. Frodo, I'd say, is not actually particularly disabled in terms of what happens to him. You know, the loss of one finger, it's not even his thumb, otherwise he couldn't grasp. It is the ring finger, yeah? It doesn't actually prevent him from grasping things and doing that much. The disability with Frodo seems to be something more psychological or spiritual or even internal. It's the wounding, yeah? He's worked tirelessly for the best of Middle-earth, so he is the martyr whose wounds stay with him like those scars. The quotes, I think I've got that back there, yeah. You know, there's no going back, I wake up in the Shire, I can't find rest, etc., etc. He's wounded with knife, sting and tooth, animal burden. And it's interesting, knife, sting and tooth, that's 3 wounds. That is a triple wound, a trinity of wounds. Yeah, I think it's not just a coincidence that it's the number 3, but with that association of the notion of martyrdom, there's perhaps an allusion to the Christian Trinity there as well. So, you know, Frodo, the martyr saint of Middle-earth, who knows? No, sorry, okay. Yeah, so try to draw this together. Galloping through this. I would say that the disabled figures, as they are used by Tolkien, are tropes for a wider narrative purpose. And this is where some theory comes in. Again, I haven't had a chance to put this on the slide. There is a book called Narrative Prosthesis, which is a literary critical book by David Mitchell and Sharon Snyder. A lot of disability theorists pick up on this. Narrative prosthesis basically argues that disability has been used as a device of characterization in literature and in film. While other marginalized identities have suffered cultural exclusion due to a dearth of images reflecting their experience, the marginality of disabled people has occurred in the midst of the perpetual circulation of images of disability in print, in literature, and visual media. In this way, Tolkien has in many ways followed suit. But I'd say he has been more complex than the Mitchell and Snyder theory would allow for, because Tolkien has not presented just one single homogeneous picture of disability. He's presented what I would argue for at least 3, the realistic, the heroic, and the metaphysical. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
You've got 6 minutes of questions. Is Tolkien's description of the impaired and the disabled different to the way the society at that time treated the disabled, or is it just?
I wouldn't, well, I mean, because Tolkien wrote and rewrote his stories over so many decades. You mentioned earlier, I think, wasn't it, Book of Lost Tales was started in the 20s, so the germ of the story of Turin is probably in the 1920s. Lord of the Rings is 1950s, so between that, over those 30 years, I'm just trying to think, have things changed? I don't think social, as in wider world, perception of disability changes between the 1920s and the 1950s. Yeah? In fact, we've got another world war with more veterans coming back, with better recovery rates, because especially surgery is advancing even more. He's basically taking a kind of, I think he's taking a mixture between the sort of Scandinavian saga approach to disability, and those are Sador and Brandir. They're very much how some of the characters in medieval sagas are described. The guys who are unmad because they have to sit at home and they can't go out and fight. So he's taking that from Tale of Turin. He's taking a kind of legendary, inspired by the Celtic stories idea, and some Greek stories as well, ancient Greek tales, of people who can overcome their disability with heroic figures. And then he mixes in that kind of Christian, medieval Christian, but then also Catholic theology. So let's say you can't blame Tolkien for this, he's actually been quite pedestrian in the way that he uses disability. But I'd say, you know, why should he? Why should it be any different? So Anna.
This is a bit of a curveball, but are there any mentions of mental disability in Tolkien's works?
I was hoping that other people would know. I was trying to go through, you know, what other disabled characters. There's one brief mention of a blind person in Tale of Turin when he has to leave Sador says something about he has to stay at home. Sador has to stay with blind Ragnir and the old women. I'm just trying to think of mental disability. Can't find one. I am dreading someone to mention Smeagol Gollum. You weren't going to, were you?
No, I wasn't. No, I was thinking of Muriel and dying of sadness and sort of, you know, succumbing a bit. But, you know, that's, yeah. My question was more about, that was a brilliant paper, by the way. I really enjoyed this, you know, it was great. The two sort of lameness stories that frame Turin's story, and the link that sort of came to mind, I think I might have mentioned it once or twice before, but in passing, and it needs to be done more, and I think your paper sort of touches on that, is the Oedipus story and
yes.
the lameness of the foot, which Turin doesn't have, and then you have a lameness, you know, a bad-footed sort of character at the beginning and one at the end. And it seems this, you know, I can't think that there's no link there between that sort of disability and Oedipus's own disability, and Oedipus as an extra source for Turin. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree, because, you know, as I just mentioned, you know, the Greek stories feed into this, and Tolkien, he started off doing classics, didn't he? So,
He did,
you know,
yeah.
And, you know, even at school, he would have been absolutely imbued with his stories. If I take that, you know, thinking out on my feet, actually, of course, because Turin has the incestuous relationship with his sister unknowingly, and of course Oedipus has the unknowing incestuous relationship with his mother.
Yeah, that's right.
So though the lameness is carried by other characters, I think you're right that, you know, the lameness feeds
It
into
seems to be
this
displaced,
story.
but
Yeah.
it's there, it's part of the
Yeah.
narrative.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I thought one possible example from the description of men people. Is it word stunted?
But is it physically stunted because he's short,
Yeah.
a dwarf, or is it mentally stunted because Nim and his two sons, was it, have lived separate from the rest of society for so long that they kind of mentally atrophied? It's an interesting.
What about dental
Now this is a real sort of, you know, different. There are massive arguments between mental illness and mental disability, and I'd say Denethor falls into the mental illness bracket. Mental disability or intellectual disability is completely different kettle of fish. How are we doing for time for questions?
One quick one.
Oh gosh,
Just a quick train of thought concerning Sador. I have recently worked a lot on Tom Shippey's Author of the Century, where he also mentions that Sador might be suffering from not really a mental disability, but a crooked vision of the world, because he is the one who tells Turin stories about the orcs pursuing women and giving to Turin the whole this phobia and fear of having his mother and sister being run down naked in the woods by the orcs, and that fear that is going to guide Turin and all his bad choices throughout his life. And I was wondering if there could be a link between this early wound of Sador that stops him from having a normal life, going to war and experiencing the same things as the other man, and then giving him this crooked vision of the world. He doesn't know about orcs, he doesn't know about the war, and yet he talks about it in a crooked way. I don't know, it's just...
I disagree, because I think Sador does actually go to war early on. He participates in warfare, he does experience it, and then he returns back to becoming a woodcutter, and he's really happy, he says, that he could do that. And then he has the accident, and in some ways, you could turn it the other way around, that the accident is fortuitous for him because he doesn't have to go out to war again, but he has certainly experienced war as a young man. So I think he's part of that sort of
Okay,
Nordic
I didn't remember
saga
that part.
thing of, the old man who's no longer physically capable but has the experience to pass on to the younger. Sorry, Liz.
Thank you.